I love this next story out of Vice because it highlights the most pervasive bad argument today that people use all the time and somehow find convincing on certain issues. They say, quote, "This week, an Irish school canceled an anti-homophobic bullying workshop because people who think homophobic bullying is A-OK weren't invited to enlighten children with their side of this hotly contested moral maze." They say, shout out, a group that provided training to combat homophobic bullying, claimed their workshop leader was told the school had decided that both sides of the argument should be given, and so the workshop wasn't allowed to go ahead. There we have it again, ladies and gentlemen. The both sides argument. So this is a fallacy. And again, I really think it's one of the most pervasive fallacies today, specifically in media. And it's the idea of false equivalence, or the embracing of neutrality over objectivity. Those are not the same thing. Remember, neutrality is always being 50-50, always being even-handed no matter what. That's neutrality. Objectivity, on the other hand, is truth, is accuracy. So if you focus on neutrality over objectivity, that means you're giving credit sometimes where credit isn't due. So for example, if you have somebody on to debate where babies come from, and one side says the stork and the other side says reproduction, neutrality is let's hear both sides now. They each get 5 minutes in the debate. Well, that's stupid. Neutrality is, at its core, dumb. It was an attempt to try to make the media more fair, but trying to move towards a better system, they actually made it worse because truth is, the roadkill in this conversation. It's nowhere allowed anymore. And here we have the same thing with this particular school and this curriculum. Now, I don't just want to pick on Irish people here because, the kings of this are Americans, and specifically American conservatives, and of course the media in America too. And the perfect example of this that we had happen here, in a lot of red states, they're changing the textbooks to not call it the slave trade anymore. They call it like the triangle trade. Because if you call it slavery, then you're kind of biasing people against it from the beginning. Don't you want them to be biased against slavery? Again, this is the problem of false equivalence. Hey, both sides, teach both sides. So what two sides are there to slavery? There's the side that's right and the side that's wrong. There's the side that's the oppressor and there's the side that's the oppressed. There's the slave master and the slave. Which one was historically correct from a moral perspective? Let me think about it. Should we teach both sides? Is that a 50-50 issue? Should we teach that the slave master was just a person who was raised in his time and didn't know any better and we should have sympathy for him? I have more sympathy for the slave myself. How about you? No, I want objectivity, not false neutrality. And they try to make it so it's slavery. Okay, brush it under the rug. Yeah, it was a bad thing, but let's call it the triangle trade so it's not to be too abrasive. Let's talk about how slaves were actually treated well and given good clothes. I'm not kidding. These are things that red states want to put in their textbooks. Slaves were treated okay, guys. They were given nice clothes and they were protected and they had a roof over their head, so the slave master wasn't all bad. Nonsense. Segregation is another one. You know what the conservatives want to argue for? They just want to sweep that part of it under the rug and say, no, the debate was over states' rights. Anytime somebody in the South screams about states' rights, run for the hill. Because it's not really about states' rights. It's about give us the states' rights to take away the real rights of black people. That's what the argument was. 10th Amendment allows us to segregate lunch counters and to keep black people as literal second-class citizens. They want to teach both sides of that, too. Focus on the states' rights aspect, not the segregation aspect. The Native American genocide. They want to talk about Dinesh D'Souza just did a fucking documentary where he claims that it's not that bad. I'm not kidding. His argument was, well, look, the Cherokees and the Algonquins and all these guys, they were killing each other, and then we just came along and made it happen faster. So we're not all that bad. They were savages to begin with. But of course, no, we were just the good people who were trying to enlighten them by doing a genocide of them and doing the Trail of Tears and the Indian Removal Act and stealing their land and yada, yada, yada. Utter nonsense. In the story between Native Americans and the white people who came here, the white people were the bad guy. If you don't like that, get the fuck over it. I love how people attack me. White guilt. Look at this guy with all of his white guilt. No, it's not white guilt. It's white intelligence. to look at an issue and be fair about it and be objective about it and say, this is what happened. And it doesn't speak bad to you. You didn't do it, right? It's not you, but doing something bad today would be denying that we were the problem, that it was white people, our ancestors, who were the fucking problem. Of course we were. They try to make it do a moral equivalence, and it's not there. Climate change, they do the same thing. And political extremism, they do the same thing too. They try to pretend like extremists on the right and the left are equal. It's the same percentage of both sides, and that's the end of the conversation. Not true. If you look at the far right, number one, they're more wrong. They have more conspiracy beliefs, and they're more violent because violence is more in line with their doctrine, whereas liberals or extremist liberals do what? They really want peace. They really want to be equitable and, have a socialist state or a communist state. Now, I disagree with them, but they're not as violent. Statistically, they're not as violent, and they're not as crazy. How many members of Congress thought that Obama was not born in America? A lot. How many think he's a socialist? A lot. Those were commonly held positions among congressional Republicans. How many liberals thought that 9/11 was an inside job? How many elected liberals? 0. So there's not an equivalence. The so-called far left in the government in America are the smartest people. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Alan Grayson. The so-called far left in America, they're international centrists. They're moderates. So the false equivalence needs to die, whether it's in this case in the Irish school or whether it's all the issues that I gave here. We need to be more objective and call things as they are.